here. So hi, welcome everyone to our session on how to successfully manage an intranet with of course insights from our 2025 Intranet Benchmarking Report. We are very excited for the next 60 minutes and we're so happy that you could join us here today. Very quick PSA at the start, recording and slides will be made available after the session. I just have to go in and cut it and upload it. So they will be coming from me very soon. So make sure you check your inboxes by the end of the day. Let's crack on. So with this next slide here, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge that I am hosting this webinar from the lands of the Nullama people. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. Now let's get into some intros. We have the whole SWOOP gang here today. It's like every swooper in the APAC region joining this call today. So of course you have myself. Hi, I'm Fran from SWOOP. I am the Marketing and Customer Success Manager here in the APAC region. I'm also joined by the amazing Dr. Lawrence Lockley, Sharon Dawson, Kai Kerr, and of course Emily O'Brien here on this call. We're also excited to get into the insights and the actions for today. We are very, very lucky to also be joined by Courtney Newad from Australian Super, Jack Zorab and Bob Johnson from Meridian Energy to share a little bit of that real world approach to some of the insights that we got going on today. So we're very lucky to have them here as well. We would also like this session to be as interactive as possible. We have polls, of course, and also please chuck any questions in the Q&A section. We'll make sure we get to them as we go through the sessions, as well as blast the chat with your chatter. We want to know who you are, where you're from, where you're dialing in from. Get to know everyone. We do love these community events to get the community together. But I'll hand over to Sharon now.
Oh, thanks, Fran, and welcome everyone. So in this webinar, we're going to walk you through some of the key findings from SWOOP Analytics 2025 SharePoint Intranet Benchmarking Report, as Fran said. And we're also going to show you how you can action this data to optimize your intranet to give people the accurate information they need to accomplish their work. And we're also going to look at how you can prepare it for AI. So in this year's report, we analysed the real-life data from 238,000 intranet visitors across 159,601 intranet pages over 28 organisations. So a pretty big sample. As far as we know, actually, it's the world's largest analysis of any SharePoint intranets. So in this year's study, we found significantly more people are actually visiting the intranet than they were last year. In fact, almost every employee is visiting the intranet, but they're spending just a few minutes a day there. So to ensure your messaging hits the mark, it's really vital that the information, it's easy to access, it's up to date, it's accurate, and as I said, it's ready for AI. So while we're on the topic of AI, you are in for a treat in this webinar. What Jack from Meridian Energy is going to show you a little bit later could be a game changer, so make sure you hang around for it. So I'm going to kick things off now by asking you a question, just to get you thinking about who uses your intranet, and we'll see what how your figures and the data stacks up with the experience that we found, or how your experience stacks up with the data we found. So poll, and we're going to ask you what percentage of employees access your intranet. Here it goes. Thank you. So for anyone, I guess, using SWOOP Analytics for SharePoint Intranet, you're going to know the answer off the top of your head, but it will be interesting to see what others say and how the data and our findings compare with what it looks like on your own intranet. So let's see if those figures are popping in. Oh, yep, here we go. Oh, we're getting lots in. So a lot of people are more that 50 to 75 range, which is great, at least 50%. And then we've got a few coming in at the 75 to 100% as well. So that's interesting that those numbers, you know, maybe are a little bit lower than what we've found, but I'm going to hand over to Laurie now, and he's going to show you what the data told us about who accesses the intranet. So over to you, Laurie.
Okay, well, thanks, Sharon. Well, yeah, I guess my question would be, how do you really know how many people are actually visiting your intranet? Because when we look at the data, the average is actually at 93% of employees from those 28 organisations. A little bit about our benchmarking. Our SWOOP's been benchmarking for over a decade now. We started Viva Engage. This is our third SharePoint Online benchmark. And therefore, we're able to look at, how things have changed from one year to the next. So from 2024 to 2025, we've clearly got a lot more people, as you said, in our sample. It's building every year, but at least half of the sample of this year participated in 2024. So we can say with some confidence that the actual number of employees is actually growing, is actually using the internet. And as Sharon said in the introduction, though, they don't spend that much time on the intranet. So we really got to make the most of that. Got to be able to make it quick to find, and also use whatever we can, including AI, to help maximize that experience. But you look at some of in the table, some of the things there, most of those numbers are actually jumping up. Some are sort of flat like news, but people are going to more content pages. They're actually going to more pages per visit too. So I get the sense that the internet is actually sitting there in the background for a lot of people. And when they get a bit of free time, they'll just pop back in and have a quick look again. So we're starting to see the sorts of behaviours that people are applying towards their intranets. Yeah, well, let's move on to the next slide, and you'll get some practical tips.
Absolutely. So what's insights without a little bit of action? So we're going to go through some 3 key action items that we've identified from this insight, which of course is simplify your page layouts and prioritize clarity and reduce cognitive load. We actually have a few SWOOP customers who gave me this little check here of getting your content authors to put their content in a Word doc so you know it's the most relevant content there, rather than heading straight for those templates. Those templates can make you feel like you need to add more content to fill out space or have images or make it a little bit more clunky for that visual appeal. Don't. Keep it simple there. That's why we also have the place critical information high on the page above the fold, and also use meaningful headings and bulleted summaries as well, so people get what they need to get from that content. Isn't that right, Sharon?
Yeah, and in the report, Emily shared the link in the chat there. We've got a great case study from Australian Super, which I'm sure you've all heard of. It's Australia's largest superannuation fund. And the case study really details about how, when they relaunched their intranet last year, they made decisions about things like page layouts, bullet points, headings, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that a little bit later. And you're also going to hear from Courtney from Australian Super very soon. But back to you, Laurie, with the next insight, please.
So how much time do people spend? Well, we got a little bit more forensic this year, because last year, I think the number we came up with was something like 16 minutes. But when we looked at that this year, we said, well, a lot of that time was spent looking at some pages that people just leave open and clearly aren't actually actively looking at the page, and we have a sort of 30-minute cutoff. So we saw a lot of pages that reached that limit. So this year we assumed that those pages weren't being looked at and didn't include them in the sample. We also decided that, if you're only on pages for seconds, like, you probably aren't really on the intranet. So we also took those out, and we made those adjustments. It comes down to less than 6 minutes, right? So, and of course, when you look at that graph, those are the 28 organisations. The red parts are the news bits, and the grey bits are the content pages. People do go to the content pages more than the news pages, which I guess is not surprising. But we're also seeing some organisations, many organisations, in fact, starting to prioritise news as well. So we're seeing, certainly looking at those leading organisations, they have a good proportion of visits for news in particular. But as I said, it's still more content than news. So what's next?
Beautiful. Thanks, Laurie. Back into the actions, the good bit. Here we go. So we've got our adopt a less is more approach to publishing. So focusing on clarity and timeliness over volume as well. For any super SWOOP fans out there, in our benchmarking study last year, we discussed a time budget, and that's never been more true. So just because you're publishing more and having more content doesn't mean people are probably spending longer to read it. In fact, they're probably skimming more to try and absorb more of the content in the time budget they've allocated. Isn't that right, Sharon?
Yeah, we're going to get into that skimming thing a little bit later, so you'll be interested in that. But yeah, just about the 6 minutes, I think one of the things we can really look at, like my background's in journalism and mainstream media, and I think and I know probably a lot of yours backgrounds are similar, so think like a news editor and prioritize news. So you can target news to specific audiences, so that can be done by tapping into Microsoft Active Directory and directing news by location, department, job role, that sort of thing. But also think about reducing the number of news articles. So this could mean consolidating news into like topics. or just being more frugal and, you know, about what makes it to print on the internet. So think like a newspaper editor. What are the most important stories of the day? What can you cut from stories? You know, aim for catchy headlines to draw people's attention and prioritize your news feed. So some tips to make the most of that 6 minutes. Back over to Laurie for the next insight.
So as I said earlier, sort of people do seem to have that intranet page sitting in their background. So when they get a bit of a break, they'll slip back and have a look at what's on the intranet, and they'll go back into their other work. And you can see, in fact, in the leading organisations, we have 4 there that have nearly 10 visits per work day. So those organisations, it's clearly sitting there in the background, sort of ready to go when they go to visit. So you know, we know it's there. We know they go to it. We know we go to it several times a day. But as I said, you know, it's short and sharp visits. So it's in some ways it's a little bit of a break for them, I guess, if you think about it that way. But so you get a little window, make the most of it.
Laurie, while you're on this slide, we've just got a question in the chat here, which can you explain this a little bit more? It's, are you excluding, this is about back to the less than 6 minutes a day, are you excluding the really long visits that people are having the tab open all day, as well as the 1 to 2 second visits? Yeah, can you just quickly explain that?
So what we do is we have a sort of like a 30-minute limit. So if the page is open for more than 30 minutes, we assume that it's just been left open. Last year, we were actually counting that as 30 minutes of a visit. And this year, we decided if it's been left open, it's hit the cap. So we've got a visit of exactly 30 minutes. Then they've really just left it open. So we've actually excluded those visits from our sample. So this visit time, it doesn't include those screens where people have just left it open in the background.
Yep. And Vivian, I see your question there. The answer is yes, definitely people are looking at more content pages than news pages, and we're going to dive into that in a little bit. So we'll hopefully answer your question in more detail very soon. But we're going to go back to the actions about people visiting, what was it, 3 times, but only viewing 2 pages. So Fran.
Absolutely, let's get into these action items. So what we're going to tell you is remember to kiss. Not quite kiss, but keep it seriously simple. So make sure you're optimizing your key landing pages with high utility links. Feature most viewed and frequently accessed content, of course, on your homepage, and make sure you're testing the navigation path with real user journeys to remove that friction. It can sort of get to the way, oh, we've had it that way forever, or that navigation set makes sense to me. Doesn't make sense to everyone. Make sure you're always testing some of those content pieces as well. And I'm going to hand back to Laurie for another insight.
And Laurie, just before we go to that, James has asked a question here. Are you able to see scroll stats and use that as the threshold?
Not that I understand. When you say what scroll stats are, do you understand any more about that, Kai, in terms of?
Yeah, no, that's true. I've just the question was from James Stoffel, and hi James. Just in the chat, I know James. We know each other like for way long time ago. No, we don't look at. We don't have data on scroll stats. Maybe we'll get in the future. Just actually, I probably talked to some of our engineers. Maybe we have it. I don't think so. But I'm taking. I've certainly written that down and say I'm just going to go back and check. I don't think we have it.
Brilliant. Let's go back to Laurie's insight there.
News articles. How many? Well, we said on average 4 news articles each week. But I guess the main news around here is that we look at the time it takes to. Well, the science tells us that to fully consume some content, you're reading at about 250 words a minute. Right, so if we look at that sort of speed and the length of the news pages, we can sort of make an assessment of how many of those news pages are actually being, comprehensively read from start to end, and we find that number is about a third, right? So not too many. So most news articles are skimmed. Now, whether that's good or bad depends on what your news strategy is and what engagement you're really seeking, but nevertheless. As we said, shorter times, sort of, clearly, the more news articles you have, the less there's the time budget that doesn't change too much, so clearly the more you have, the more likely that your news articles are going to be scanned or skimmed rather than read comprehensively. Now, I guess the question is, do you care about it? So, and some of you probably do. Others might think, no, that's normal. So back to you, Fran.
Beautiful. Back with another action item here. So we're going to talk a little bit back to that time budget again. Most people aren't reading your news from start to finish. You have to make it snappy, which is into that first insight there, which is write shorter, scannable articles. We're recommending between 100 and 300 words for most updates. Of course, there's going to be nuances in that with the type of content type it is. You know, if it's a people-led story, perhaps maybe it's a little bit longer, or okay to have it as a little bit longer because people are interested in people. But keep it short and snappy. Isn't that right, Sharon?
Yeah, absolutely. And what am I going to touch on? Hopefully, Vivian might help a little bit with your question as well. So we also analysed how long it would take to read all news articles published on the intranet every week. So this is the average across the 28 organisations. Any ideas? Put your ideas in the chat. You're probably going to be blown away. It would take 23 hours and 10 minutes to read all news articles on average across the intranet each week. So that's more than half the working week would be spent keeping up to date on company or organisational news. That's each and every week. So obviously that's totally unsustainable, which is why it's so important to target audiences, as we touched on before, and be more frugal in what you publish, just as we spoke about before. But one of the other points we mention here in this list is the what's in it for me angle. And in our 3 years of benchmarking intranets and 11 years benchmarking Viva Engage, the thing that's always stood out for us when it comes to engagement with internal comms is when stories are about colleagues. So Courtney from Australian Super has the perfect example of this to share with us today. So Courtney, can you come and join us and share your examples, please?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Sharon. As you mentioned, I'm Courtney. I'm a colleague communications advisor at Australian Super. And today I'll share a little bit of an example of how we took a topic and put more of a colleague-focused angle on it and really profiled that colleague and how that led to much better engagement for our news.
That's great. So yeah, in this report, we have a great case study, as Courtney just mentioned, from our mental health first aid, or on a mental first aid program that they ran with a news article on that. Perhaps if I go to this next slide here, Courtney, you can maybe just talk through some of the aspects that you've included in this news article here.
Yeah, for sure. So this article was based on Jeff Warner. He is one of our very beloved colleagues at the fund. He's been with us for 13 years now. And, you know, he's very well respected and very well liked. And he's actually a contact officer and mental health first aider. So that's a voluntary role at the fund on top of, you know, your day job. Contact officers are essentially a point of contact for colleagues to confidentially discuss concerns about bullying, discrimination, harassment, or inappropriate behavior, and a mental health first aider. They're trained to provide initial support to colleagues who are experiencing a mental health problem or crisis. And, you know, that's probably a service at the fund that many colleagues might not be familiar with that we have, is that you have these people that you can reach out to and confidentially chat with. So we wanted to just highlight and remind people that that is an option. And so we took on the angle of profiling one of the volunteers, which in this case is Jeff. This article, I know you talked about, you know, having a interesting headline. So it starts with that rhetorical question of, you know, think you know Jeff Warner, you might be surprised. And I'm sure many colleagues who've encountered Jeff over his 13 years at the fund think they might know him. But this article really just discusses a bit about Jeff's upbringing, the things that interest him outside of work. So it very lightly touches on, you know, what he does in his day job, but it's just focused on more of Jeff as a person and, you know, what might you like to know about him? And we've included some pictures there and sort of that top line explanation of what a contact officer or a mental health first aider is. If you just go on to the next slide, Fran, is that the rest of the article?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here you can see we've even got a photo gallery of Jeff. He loves to travel. So he's very kindly shared with us some images of his travels and also of very family focused person, as well as a list of all of the other contact officers that we have available for you to speak to at the fund. And this article ended up getting 56 likes and 14 comments, which 56 likes is just absolutely unheard of. If we can get anywhere between, 5 to 10 likes on a news article, I would say that's pretty good. So this article was absolutely a top performer. And looking at the comments, a lot of them are about, praising Jeff and, the awesome person that he is, but also I'll just read one of the comments I've pulled up here is from one of Jeff's leaders, is a fantastic leader and colleague who is passionate about mental health. Please reach out to a contact officer or your people leader if you need support. All of us have times in our lives where we need to lean on others. So that was a really nice comment in there that is also just reiterating the fact that we do have these mental health first aiders and contact officers available, and really just, carrying that conversation as well.
And Courtney, what was the standout for me when you told me this story was this was the second shot at trying to communicate about this mental health first aid program, right? So the first story you wrote, well, can you explain that a little bit? It was just a straight news story.
Yeah, so just in that top screenshot, the September to November, let's focus on mental health. And that is pretty straight to the point. It was just an article talking about some of the mental health events and initiatives we sort of had planned over the September to November quarter. But that, I think in the headline itself, probably wasn't pulling in colleagues as much. They probably weren't as interested, but also looking at the content of the article, it was sort of just listing the things that were happening versus, Jeff's article, that second one and the second screenshot there, you can just see that it has just outperformed that article by quite significantly. In that first article, 7 likes, 0 comments, compared to Jeff's article where you have 56 likes and 14 comments is just, far more, as well as looking at everything, including the views, the visitors, and visitors, visits, and views, which, is just significant. So that was a real, really showed us how much people, one, enjoy seeing their colleagues featured in articles. And that's also something that I will say we've continued to practice, and we do continue to see good engagement. And you've got 2 other articles in that second screenshot that are also colleague focused. And while you'll see that the visitors, visits, and views numbers aren't, I guess nearly as high as Jeff's, you've still got 43 likes, 33 likes on one of them. I was just having a look just before at some of the other pieces we've published this year, and we have a colleague network called Connecting Cultures, which is all about, celebrating diversity within the fund. And we've done a couple of articles. One was on Lent and Easter, and another one was on, we've got Ramadan there, and that we just talk to colleagues who have a personal connection to those and what it meant to them. They also shared some pictures. And so they're not ridiculously long articles. It's just people talking about what matters to them, talking about themselves outside of work. And those have got upwards of 30 likes.
Unreal. I've just got a question, Courtney, from Grant. Can you tell us how many employees you have overall, just so we can get a rough idea of what the percentage is?
We have roughly 2,000 colleagues across primarily Australia, but we also have some in London and New York as well.
Well, Courtney, thank you so much. And Courtney's going to hang around at the end for some questions, and there's some great stuff that she can share about relaunching an intranet too. So this is such a great example, I think, especially when you can see the data that shows the difference in engagement when stories are personalised. But before we go, before Courtney leaves the screen, we have to officially congratulate Australian Super on its success in our benchmarking study. So Australian Super was overall the top performing intranet in our benchmarking. So please join me in congratulating Courtney and the team. And as I mentioned, there's 2 great case studies in the report from Australian Super. So another thing we analysed as part of our benchmarking report is who is visiting the intranet. So back over to you, Laurie.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Well, this is something that we did last year with our Viva Engage sort of study, and we actually use generative AI to help us work out which job roles are actually being active. So simply what we did here was that those organisations that gave us permission to look at the titles in their Active Directory, we exported all of those titles, and we basically just used generative AI to classify those titles into job roles. So as you can see here, the most active job role are the actual managers and team leads. And interestingly enough, I think that was the same for Viva Engage. So they were the number one. But number two was actually unclassified, which meant that there was a whole heap of job roles that didn't fit into any particular classification, which was the second highest. So that's saying that we've got a quite broad reach with the intranet, and which is very encouraging. If you look down at the other end, though, we have frontline workers and admin workers. Now, they're often a target for our digital assets, and it's a challenge for us to get those sorts of people active. Another part of the study looks at how people are accessing the intranet, and we found that this year only 8.3% of employees access the intranet from their mobile phones, and largely we would assume that a lot of frontline workers are actually accessing their digital assets through mobile phones. So clearly there's a way to go. I might say that 8.3% was actually significantly higher than 2024. So it is trending up, but clearly we've got a fair way to go yet before we can fully engage people like frontline workers and maybe some of the more mobile administrative workers as well. But nevertheless, this is something I think you yourselves can do. So you can export your job titles out, just feed it into whatever Copilot or whatever generative AI you're using, and just ask it to classify the titles and have a look at and see if yours follow a similar trend. And clearly that gives you an idea of where to target some of your activities in terms of job roles. So back to you. Oh, no, I'm still here. So the other thing is looking at days of the week and sort of hours of the day. Again, this is not dissimilar to what we saw with Viva Engage. So, largely, things are a little bit more active in the beginning of the week, but, really they don't drop off that much towards the Thursday. Of course, the weekend, people don't access it as much then. That sort of twin peak pattern that we have in the hours of the day, we see that in Viva Engage as well. Largely, people like going there, say, when they first get in the morning. It's a good way to start the day. And also, it's a good way to get going again after you might have had a midday break. So again, we see those same sorts of patterns. So if you want to sort of target people in particular hours of the day or days of the week, but certainly in hours of the day, try and get things in there so that when they first come in or just after the midday break, that that you've got something hitting them at that time. Back to you.
Some more actions. Thank you, Laurie. So, of course, hitting people when they're active. So, schedule intranet use and content updates to go live when they are at their desks and or mobile devices ready to catch that publication. Monitor usage patterns. Of course, with something like SWOOP for SharePoint, you can monitor the usage patterns of your own environment to tailor the publishing times. And of course, avoid releasing important updates late on a Friday unless you don't want anyone to see them. Then that might be the perfect time for you. But if you do want those eyeballs, we don't recommend it. Handing over to Sharon now for some more analysis.
Yeah, so we've touched on this. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into this whole AI thing. So one of the things we analyse in this year's benchmarking report is the current state of AI readiness across intranets. So we actually created an AI readiness index, which we used across all the benchmarked organisations to get an AI readiness score. So I'm going to hand over to Kai now. And Kai, can you explain what this AI readiness is?
Yeah, you bet. It seems that everyone is talking about AI. Is that right? It's almost sounds like, oh, it's almost too much. But it's certainly something that is on everyone's minds. And given that I think most of you that are in the audience today, being you are, of course, involved with intranets or internal comms. So writing and publishing is dear to many of your hearts. Often when we talk to companies about what they're thinking in terms of AI, it's often something to assist them in the writing process. But something we can see that a growing number of organizations are now starting to look at is that everything that they've written, which is being published to the intranet, and then saying, well, maybe we put a generative AI bot, a SharePoint agent, if you're into SharePoint, on top of the intranet, so people can start to ask questions such as, can I bring my dog to work? Can I do this? Do we have when is the next annual leave day? Or, like, can I see the summary of the town hall meeting, or things like that? You can see the more content you have, maybe we could allow finally to get that intranet search to actually work in a better way. Something that we often hear, that the searches has been historically been hard. So now, so obviously, sort of given that the way, as I'm sure you all know, the way that generative AI works is that it'll, if you do it on top of your intranet content, all that content, it'll index that so it's ready to be searched, and then it'll, but depending on what the question is, it'll find the answer in the content. Now that means that content should be good, high quality, because it will be found. Just because it's put in a folder on a page that no one ever visits, that doesn't mean that generative AI or a SharePoint agent can't find it. So one of the things we wanted to find out then is saying, well, how confident could we be? Can we sort of get a measure for how confident we can be before we turn on this conversational AI bot on top of our intranet? And that's what the AI readiness index is really about. So we looked at content readiness, as you can see. We looked at search effectiveness, because we can see that if there are lots of search queries that are not giving any answers, then it could be that maybe the content you have doesn't meet the need of the audience. We also looked at engagement readiness, and all those three things have made up the AI readiness. And you can see how organizations score from left to right. And actually, it gives us a good sense. We looked at and say that index, if you can see the index is on the right-hand side, on the vertical axis. And if you get above around 54, then we'd say we can see based on the data, then that means that your content is like, it is fresh. It's been recently updated. The person who works there, is the person who has last updated the document still works at the organization. So there's a whole bunch of parameters that we use, and I want to show you what that looks like, slightly with some real data. But I guess you can also see if the target goal is really around 54, you can also see that many of our benchmarking organizations that are saying, well, we're not quite ready yet. And we do, I think you all know that. Give me a thumbs up if you know that some of the content in your intranet probably needs to be updated. Can you give me a thumbs up? All right, yes. So I think the moment you have that sense, like, you probably have that bit of nervousness about whether that content is really ready, which means you're probably also thinking, ooh, should we just hang on a little bit before we then set AI loose? And the point we're making is that your whole intranet probably doesn't have to be, totally polished and in the ultimate fine shape. Maybe you could start small. And I want to show you some examples of how you can start small.
Yep, we'll get to that in a sec, Kai, because we are just going to go for a poll question now.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
yeah. So we would love to know if you're using AI in any form in relation to your intranet. So can you launch that poll, please, Fran? So we've just put a few points here, and this could be anything from content creation to summarizing documents, or even working on AI chatbots or SharePoint agents. And we've got so most people are using it for content creation. Yeah, really interesting. Summarizing documents. Oh, a few for AI chatbots. That's really interesting. So we're asking this question just to get a feel for how AI is currently being used. But I'm going to bring in Bob and Jack from Meridian Energy here, and they've got some great stuff to share with us. So Bob, can I start with you? And can you just start by just telling us a little bit about Meridian Energy, about your intranet, and how you're using AI on your intranet already?
Thank you, Sharon. Kia ora koutou, ko Bob Tokuingoa. So I'm Bob Johnson from Meridian Energy here in New Zealand, and myself and Jack, who you'll hear from soon, are the dynamic duo, I guess, of internal comms here at Meridian. So we're New Zealand's largest renewable electricity generator, and we've got people spread across a range of offices and also generation sites like wind farms and hydro assets all across the country. In terms of our intranet, we're a Microsoft shop, so we run our intranet on SharePoint Online. It's called Electric Avenue. We love puns here. And I guess quite fittingly on the AI side of things, we've been trialing Microsoft Copilot with a small bunch of people within the company, which has been great to test capability and see where that value is in terms of our intranet and internal comms. So Jack and I have really been thinking about what are those use cases that are useful from an internal comms point of view. So I guess the things that we've found are really interesting, we're using it, like the poll said, for things like content creation and review, the quick kind of shortening and sharpening of some of those messages coming through to us. We've also been helping we're using it to help us with some of the more meaty things. When we go into meetings and workshops, if we're developing next year's strategy, utilising that to kind of summarise our thoughts and help kind of map it out so we can pick it up and put our brains to the strategic putting together rather than the note-taking. And keeping a really, really close eye on things like SharePoint page creation. No spoilers here, but how that saves us time and plays into that brevity game, and Copilot agents. So we have been exploring that as an overlay, like Kai said, over our intranet. How do we get that information that people are asking into their hands faster to replace that pesky search bar, which we have, it's no secret. So yeah, we've been dabbling quite a lot and seeing a lot of areas of value, but we are early on in the journey, I would say, in terms of AI and how we adopt it at Meridian here.
Yeah, it's interesting, Bob, that you say you're early on in the journey, and I totally understand that. But from a lot of other people that we've spoken to, you guys are pretty advanced. You're getting there. And then, so just on that, you alluded to this earlier. I'm going to bring Jack in, and Jack's going to screen share. And Jack, can you show us and explain to us some of the things that you AI for your intranet that could be, hopefully, is a game changer for anyone who hasn't been using this or maybe isn't very confident using this?
Kia ora, Sharon, thanks. And kia ora, Kartik. I see you there in the comments. You see that screen come through? Yeah?
Yeah.
Taking a while to load. Yeah, cool. Alrighty, thanks very much. So, yeah, as Bob said, we've been using it to create SharePoint pages. So we have got a few SharePoint and Copilot licenses that we play with. So I'll do a quick live demo. Hopefully it works. It's worked, although I've said it before, creating a page. To do it, I guess for us, quite often we get people send us content to create just in a Word document. They send it to us to put into a resource page on our intranet, which is called Electric Avenue. This is one I actually got Copilot to write it, so none of this is factual. It's just got Copilot to write me information to put into a resource page. And from SharePoint, I can create a page with Copilot. If you know SharePoint, there's new posts and pages. This one's going to be a page, a resource page. Big thing about using things like Copilot and AI is your prompt. So here's the prompt that I actually got Copilot to help read earlier. But it's basically what I want from it. And I guess something that we've really learned is just treat Copilot or Gen AI as your assistant or your intern. Like just explain it as if you're explaining it to a colleague or a co-worker. Being polite always helps, but more being specific about what you want. If you're not specific, you're going to get rubbish back. I'm going to pop in a document that I showed you earlier. So basically, I'm just asking it to create me a SharePoint resource page using that document. I'm specifying that I want the headings in the document to be structure of the page. And I want a summary section at the bottom, as well as a contact card for the travel team. I only use content from the document. This one's really important for me because otherwise it thinks it's being helpful and it'll pull more stuff to make it more factual. I do get the option and the choice of how I want it to sound. So I think travel's pretty exciting, so let's make it enthusiastic. But it's also something when I'm booking travel, I want to be quite quick at it. So I'm going to make this one concise. It's as easy as that. We hit go and it starts whirring away. It's maybe not as quick as you might expect, but if you imagine what it's doing, it's way quicker than I would be if I was going in, creating a page, layouts, doing all that stuff. If you haven't spotted it, there's a progress bar at the end, and this is all real time. So this is happening as we speak. So have a look and you do the judge of whether it's any use. But I think from listening to certainly what Fran was saying about keeping it super simple, it does a really good job at laying out a page fairly similar to how we would expect them to be laid out. But again, as with all the kind of Gen AI stuff, and most people who are worried about Copilot and AI taking the jobs, I don't think they must be worried for a few more years. Like, this will do a grunt work. It'll take you to maybe 75% of the way there, but it's our skill and expertise that will make it kind of material. But that's it. It's just created a page. These are randomly generated AI images. You can keep or throw them if you want. But when I look back at my Word document and the stuff that was in there, it's actually done a pretty good job of putting it all together. I would say limitation with this feature, you get one shot. So I can keep this page as it's generated, or I can discard it. And if I discard it, I have to start all over again. So I can't now say, oh, I like that bit not so much. So if you like it, keep it. If you don't, discard it. And again, it's your page to edit as you like. And then within this page now, we do have a Copilot feature. So within those text boxes, you can highlight bits of text and say, hey, look, either rewrite it, or I said to be enthusiastic, but actually, certainly that bit, I want to be more professional. So it's just going to rewrite it and say, yeah, cool, here's a few suggestions. You could use this bit, you could use this bit, maybe use this bit, and this should place it in the page. So it, like I say, it's not going to replace us anytime soon. Really, don't be worried. But it's just, man, it's a big help, especially when you get long-winded content. You can ask it to pull content from the rest of your SharePoint. So where Kai was saying, if you're intranet AI ready, even if it's not, you'd be surprised at how much stuff it can find and pull together and how accurate it can be. But probably my final comment would be through our trial and the interviews that we've done with people is those people who spend the time, they're curious, they play with it, they trial those prompts, those are the ones that are getting the most out of it. The people who try it once and go, right, not as good as me, and don't use it, you're going to get left behind. So yeah, just be curious, try it, and have some fun with it, whatever it is that you're trying.
That is so helpful, Jack. I haven't seen that before. Thumbs up if anyone else is using Copilot to do the same thing. Well, not many thumbs up. So hopefully this has been helpful for other people. And I know, Courtney, even when we were speaking with you about your relaunch, like some of the times you were saying it's so much easier if people send you Word documents rather than trying to create pages. And Bob and Jack, is that the same experience for you? It's easier if Word documents come your way and then you guys can create those pages?
Absolutely, because I mean, we have it built into the 365 suite. So when something's in a Word document, you can kind of use Copilot to interrogate it and have that conversation. So it helps from that point of view, absolutely, rather than trying to do something like Jack says, where you get one shot. Otherwise, you need to start from scratch.
Yeah.
The other good part to it is it really makes the person who's requesting the content think about it. So when they say, I need a page about this, you're like, cool, you write the content and give it to me in a document, or give me everything that you need, and so you generally get a better hit rate from that back and forth of, is this all right? No,
yeah. And can I just ask, Bob and Jack, while I've got you, is yours a centralized or decentralized for publishing on your intranet? Like, does it all go through the two of you, or can anyone publish a page?
We have a small team of content champions who help us create the content, but we do have Power Automate approvals kind of flow, so we get a little link just to check, and then we can approve, so we can make little tweaks before it goes live. But it's decentralized when it comes to news articles. Anyone can author.
Yeah.
And if
so
anyone would see more information on that, anyone can author. We have Jack's presentation from our festival from last year, so we can make sure you'll get the link on that, which was fantastic. I will encourage you to go watch that one as well.
Yeah, and so I guess just to wrap up, what that does show, Jack, what the demo that you just gave us really shows that you have to have up-to-date, accurate information in going even on pages coming through Word docs. But for your intranet, you know, especially if you do start to move on to using chatbots, if you've got out of date information, inaccurate information, it's going to pick up on those things, and then, you know, it's a useless tool. So I guess we've heard from Kai that most intranets are a long way from being AI ready. So what can you do to get your intranet AI ready? I'm going to hand back to Kai and Fran now, and we can ask Bob and Jack everyone questions in the end too. We'll have time for that.
Thanks, Bob and Jack. Kai, let's get into that demo.
Yes. So what I want to show you. So Jack, the demo God praying worked. I was cross my fingers that would work. So can you cross your fingers for me now? Because now I'm going to try and do the same thing. So let's see if we can get that screen up and running. So what I'm showing you here is SWOOP for SharePoint. I want to show you some of the things that I think that we are helping organizations, making it easier to become AI ready. I mentioned things about how you can ensure that the content is, you know, ready, it is up to date, and also talk a little bit about the challenges of trying to get the whole intranet ready in one go. For some of you guys, we have some customers where there's like hundreds of SharePoint sites that make up intranets. So it can go from anywhere, like I can almost like anywhere from, not from one. I think maybe the smallest number of SharePoint sites we come across might be, I don't know, 5, but up to hundreds. So like it sounds like mission impossible to clean all this up before you start. Maybe actually we can hear back from Australian Super how they cleaned up their whole intranet, and so there might be some cleanup process required. But let's say that you are wondering, what do you do right now to clean up your intranet? So in SWOOP for SharePoint, we have a couple of different things we can have a look at. First, I'm going to show you, go down to health over here. So on the health scores, we show you the quality of a page, the experience, which I'll come back to in a moment, and then engagement. This is a demo site, so there's not a lot of visitors here, so that's why it's so low. But I'm actually going to go into a particular page, and then we can have a look at and say whether this is good content. So I'm going to click on this one for position descriptions to just give you an example of a particular page. And if I click on this one, we're saying, oh, this has not been modified for 12 months, you know, and we haven't found any broken links. We found a spelling mistake. So spelling mistakes doesn't really matter that much because AI can always fix that up. You know, when it writes a response, it doesn't really matter that it's got spelling mistakes. It does matter if they're broken links. That's not so good. And also, especially if the content is old, it's not so good. And also, if the person who last modified it isn't there anymore, it's not very good either. When it comes to readability, we use the lick score, and it doesn't actually, it matters a lot. If you've got a person accessing a page, if it's hard to read the page, like it matters. But the beauty of AI, I guess, is that it'll rewrite it. So if you say, like, just write me a simple summary of the HR policy, it'll do that. And it doesn't actually matter that the source was really complex and hard to read. But we also look at heading complexity, and particularly this one about heading ratios. So AI does work a lot better. And in our benchmarking report, if you look at I think it's the appendix at the back, you'll see like a little exercise we did where we had a very nicely formatted document that was very clear, and then kind of like just to contrast that with a really poorly written policy. And then we were asking the same question, and you can see that the answer was actually a lot better when you have a very well-written document that's very well structured. And generative AI does like source files that are very well structured, nice headings, nice sub-bullet points, and then it doesn't get confused very much. So these are the things that we use to basically give an indication of whether or not your intranet is AI ready. So you can do this at the page level, but if we go up to the whole intranet levels, these health scores then also are applied. If you can imagine, there's a score for every page that rolls up to every site, that rolls up to the whole intranet. So if this was my intranet and I've got 4 sites, I can sort of have a look at and say, well, what is the score and which site should I start with? So instead of trying to maybe build a SharePoint agent and building a generative, AI bot for your whole intranet, you can just focus on 1 or 2 sites and say, well, let's start with the HR policies, or let's start with the travel section, or let's start with this. You go out and you sort of clean that up, prove to the business that this bot really works, it generates the desired outcomes, and that's perfect. The last thing I just want to share with you is that, okay, we're an analytics company, so yes, we care a lot about the numbers, right? And we built our own little doctor, we call it Dr. Swoop, but this is our generative AI bot that sits inside. So this is kind of similar to building an intranet bot. This sort of works the same way. This trolls through a whole lot of content. So I can ask, what can I use from Swoop to make my insights better? It's going to think for a little while and come back with an answer. And when it comes back with the answers, you'll actually see it's come up in blue. So some blue references that's coming up here. These are the source files that sits behind it. What we realized as a bot owner, just like you will be the bot owner for your intranets, we really care about what questions people are asking. We really care about what the bot is answering. And we really care about what sources are being used behind this. And I think from an analytics perspective, what we're going to be seeing over the next 12 to 24 months is a big desire and need for those of us and those of you that are actually delivering these chatbots, is to be able to provide good insights that allow us to manage the bots. Because in essence, what we're seeing is that these bots are becoming their own digital communication channel. It's the place where people go, find, and get information. And just like you have to be on top of your intranet, you also have to be on top of this like derivative work, which is the chatbot. So I think there's going to be something really exciting about insights, and keep on following us. We'll soon start to publish about what we are learning from our analytics journey with our own bot and how we think that kind of thinking can be applied to intranet bots as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for that one, Kai. And I think I really appreciate that you can use AI for your AI as well, and use those analytics to really get a scope of, well, are you ready for that AI bot to be applied? And we try to make it as easy as possible. We try to make analytics for people who aren't data analysts, so you can jump in there, grab your key insights, and jump out and do the real work. Maybe it's counterintuitive. We want you to spend less time in our dashboards, more time doing the actual work, but that is the progress of the beast there. Let me share my screen, get these slides up. I might just have to do a little jump around to the correct slide here, so just give me a sec. There we go. So if we had the demo, thank you, Kai. Now we get into the fun part. I know you're all obsessed with me. You can't get enough. Well, I do weddings, birthdays, but I also do demos and training sessions. So if you want to go ahead, grab that QR code there. Are you ready for your own AI chatbot on your instance as well? We can get into Swoop for SharePoint. We can get into Swoop for Viva Engage, Teams, and M365 as well. You let me know. We can chat about it. I do love to yap around as well. But of course, we can't let you leave this fantastic session without downloading our report. I'm sure a lot of you already have it in your inboxes, but please go ahead, grab that QR code there, fill in the details, and you can receive your own free copy as well. I might just leave this on screen for a while. Perhaps I'll get into a little bit of Q&A. I think we've got a bit of time for that.
Yeah.
So hand over to Sharon for that one.
There's lots of questions in the Q&A I'm going to start with, but please just raise your hand or jump in even and ask questions. But I've got one here while we're still talking about AI ready. Kai and Jack and Bob, this might be a good one for you too. This is from Taryn. It's regarding AI readiness. We've embarked on a process to uplift our data that feeds the intranet and in turn AI chatbots. We found limitations where SharePoint features and components are not AI friendly. Example, expandable sections, quick links, and other features are not accessible to AI. It can't confirm what great data sits behind a quick link or an expandable section. Do you have any updates or tips on navigating this constraint? Jack might be the right one for this.
say Taryn's further along than we are, yeah, getting stuff ready. But agree, for us, it's Viva Engage. Like Copilot doesn't call Viva Engage, so where we're getting news and stuff posted there, it's not calling that yet. So I think we've seen or heard that that's on the roadmap. So hopefully this kind of stuff is going to be on the roadmap too, right? Because if it's there in the intranet, are you expected to completely redo everything, just try and make it ready, or hopefully can Microsoft overlords make our lives a wee bit easier?
I might also add to that, Jack, that I think what Microsoft is doing, by the way, I'm not a Microsoft expert. So if anyone here on the call who is from Microsoft or is a deep expert in this, then, come off mute. What we built with Dr. SWOOP is an Azure AI bot. So we use Microsoft technology to build the chatbot. Carly, Scott, I can see you're from Microsoft, so you're here. So maybe you can jump in here. But I think if you want to build something that's really custom and that really works, you probably need to do something. I think the idea with the SharePoint agents is something like quick and fast. Microsoft is extending features all the time, but my sense was it was like quick and fast, port to some sources, and you can get something up and running really fast. But if you want to do like more extensive things than that, I think the point will probably be to Azure, OpenAI, and what's called Foundry Studio. Is that right, Carly? What?
Look, I was just going to put in the chat, hey, I'm here from Microsoft, but I'm not really a SharePoint deep expert, so that would be something I'd need to go away and have a look at. But definitely I can ping me in the background and I'll come back to you with an answer, and then you can share that with everybody. But hey, everybody. Yeah.
Sorry, Carly, I didn't mean to adopt you or anything like that, but
no worries.
Certainly I've been playing a lot with the SharePoint agents. I think this sort of summary is that it's like a really fast, boom, get something up and running. But if you want to do something like, and Taryn, I think might be, a bit, maybe you're too ambitious for what you can get up with the quick and dirty sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that, look, there's some cool stuff coming too, but I'll leave you to it. But I'll go and see if I can find some stuff now and post it in the chat, or not, I'll come back to you. Thanks for the call out.
Thanks for doing that. I'm going to switch directions here now. Kim's got a question about intranet homepage analytics, which we actually have as one of our key insights. We just didn't share it today. She's asking, saying for us, the intranet homepage is the default for our browser, which we found was most organisations did have the intranet homepage as the default browser. Which SKUs hits do we factor that in? Kai, you've messaged there. Can you just share that, please?
Absolutely. Kim, Kim is with NAB, and it's a good friend of SWOOP, so it's lovely to have you here, and thanks for the question, Kim. So I just put in the comments the question that it's actually the vast majority of people, it's 96.4%. That visit the intranet homepage also visit other pages, and it's a small percentage. It was like 3 or 4% that only visit the homepage. So I think the assumption is that I think actually, in the past I thought, it's a bit of a trick, isn't it, to use the homepage as your default browser? It's kind of like fake traffic. But when we look at the data, I think it's a really good tip to do, because people actually, like 96.3% of people actually visit other pages as well. So, and it's only, as a small proportion that are not going on to visit other pages. Now, that doesn't mean that every time they open the browser, they might click away from it. But when we look at the number of people, it's certainly most of them visit other pages. So my conclusion was, this is a neat tip. So if you're doing that, Kim and Ab, keep on doing it.
Yeah, and it really emphasises, doesn't it, of showcasing that news those messages you want to target to your employees, putting that on the homepage. So when it is the default browser, they see it immediately and can click on and read more, whether that be on the intranet or Viva Engage, or moving on. So I've got a question here from Ree. Would the suggestion be to link those need to read information news type alerts to the evergreen content that they'll live on the pages? Sorry, I'm just trying to see. So we're talking. Yeah, okay, Kai,
could you come on mute and just maybe explain? I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
Sorry, I asked this question like in the moment when
Oh.
the slide was up, and I didn't realize that it would be at the end. But it was when the team was discussing the news pages being read, being skim read, and weren't being engaged with as what we would ideally like them to be, because it's news because it's need to read information. So I guess my question was, would the suggestion be to link those news type alerts not to news pages, but rather the evergreen content that'll live on the page, and then having like 3 dot points at the top of like, this is what's changed, this is what you need to know?
I hadn't thought of that. That sounds, what do people think? Give me a thumbs up. That sounds like a pretty nice idea, but there's a couple of hands, so maybe that's a good idea.
I'll be here all week. I try the veal.
Yeah, like I guess what you're saying, if you get to the HR policy page, which many people might visit, not every day, but if there's some relevant news about HR, maybe put it on that policy page, because that's where people will go anyway, instead of the news page. So yeah, maybe, I think that's not bad.
I've got another question from Emma here. Is there functionality to help deal with assets associated with pages? How do others deal with tidying that associated content? Courtney, have you got any examples of that? Of so is there functionality to help deal with assets associated with pages, and how do others deal with tidying that associated content?
Not from my perspective. I don't think we have anything in place for that. Yeah, I think everyone our content owners sort of manage their assets associated with their own pages. We do have like a folder in the back end that we would suggest they upload their assets into, but we do find that people end up doing things a little bit differently depending on how they manage their pages. So we don't really have much oversight of that. We kind of hand them the keys to manage their pages, and then from there, they manage their assets accordingly.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question. David's got a great point, just to Ree's point there before about having time-sensitive announcements on a content page, is that they would date rapidly. So again, governance and everything that Kai touched on, the AI readiness, is really important. I might have missed, because I was looking between the Q&A and the chat, so I might have missed quite a few questions, but we're over time. So keep the questions coming and we'll try to answer them. And I'm over to you, Fran.
Just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for staying on, and for the cheeky 2 minutes we added on to the end there as well. If you want to hang around and chat some more, we're more than happy to go through any questions. But thank you so much for joining us for our briefing session here, and we hope to see you all at our next SWOOP events as well. Have a great day, everyone, and we'll chat more soon.
And a special thanks to Courtney and Jack and Bob. Thank you so much for joining us. It's wonderful to hear real life examples, not just the data from us.